Hello and welcome to part 3 in the Harry Mason scale videos. If you've seen parts 1 and 2, then welcome back. If not, that's okay, this one is separate to those two. This video is best played with headphones on, in a dark room if you can. Don't worry, there's no jump scares in this video, in fact watching it is completely optional. Listening to it though is essential.
Mary, could you really be in this town?
Sound design is something all games have. As long as a game has music and sound effects, it has some level of sound design, no matter how imperceptible it may be or how little effort seems to have gone into it. Today we're going to be listening to music, examining sound effects, and talking about voice acting in horror games. Music plays a heavy part in most horror game experiences and turns even the most unassuming moments into moments of apprehension, fear, or bewilderment. When the music suddenly shifts to something tense, it almost always affects the player too, whether they're aware of it or not. The music we're talking about here just plays in the background of certain areas and gives them a feeling. The spooky, dreamlike pieces that play during your time in the Manor of Sleep in Fatal Frame 3 have an unearthly feeling to them, like you're drifting through another world or lost on the moon, which is exactly what the game is trying to convey, since the Manor of Sleep is implied to exist in a dream world itself. Music affects the atmosphere the most, and some games rely on it heavily to tinge otherwise normal-looking places with an emotion. In Scratches, the house seems somewhat normal to begin with, but as you explore the place and the music that plays in the background is a melancholy dirge of pianos and string instruments that makes the house seem sad and empty. I'm sure for people who play horror games a lot, there's certain pieces of music that will always conjure up a specific area or feeling when heard. It's just that powerful, though this isn't exactly exclusive to horror games. Incidental music is when music starts playing to emphasize something happening. A classic example of this is the kind of musical stab that's played to add shock to a jump scare, but they can go deeper than that. Many people will argue that all video game music is incidental music, but for the most part, normal background music starts playing when you enter an area, rather than when something specifically happens. With a game like Amnesia: The Dark Descent, the chase music is essentially a grating noise that's designed to instill fear in a player as they run away from the enemies. Games like Outlast have specific music that plays when you instigate a chase, and it's used in a lot of other games too. One of my favourite pieces of incidental music is from Soma. It plays when you approach Tau after the long and terrifying run through the abyss. The music itself gives a feeling of desolation and uncertainty, like where you're going is barely any better than where you've been. The more strange and disturbing a music piece is, the more it will probably have an impact on the player. This piece from Silent Hill 2 plays when you reach the 3rd floor in the apartments, which, unless you stop to listen to it, will not even really get started before the game moves on to the next piece of music as you pass through the door. But it feels as if something is going to happen if you wait, so maybe it is best to leave. The effect of sound effects can be everlasting, but it's mostly subjective how they affect people. A person might find a door opening sound creepy and another may think nothing of it. But nowadays, a game without sound effects is usually considered unfinished. You need to have sound feedback for things that the player does. It's really about setting a tone with a specific sound. The start game button in Silent Hill 2 has that no way back feeling, or maybe that you started something that you shouldn't have. On the other hand, the more visceral sounding blasts and stomps from Dead Space sound disgusting, but there's also a certain satisfaction of delivering a deserved fate for the vile necromorphs. It enhances the experience of combating them. Whilst all of these are the kind of things you expect to hear after interacting with things, the more interesting sound effects come from the environment around the player. Good sound design can do far more for the experience than graphics can, especially in horror games. There are of course thousands of games that use sound effects to bring environments to life by simply existing. Running water, burning torches, buzzing lights. These little things do immeasurable good to a game's atmosphere and can leave a game feeling static and artificial when they're not there. Even the sound of wind blowing can make something eerie. A little bit of sound design can go a long way. But excelling with sound design has infinite rewards. Going back to Dead Space, just stopping in any part of the Ishimura will often reward headphone users with a plethora of strange metallic ambience, whispers, hums, and other ghostly or alien noises, which is part music, part sound effects playing in the area. It makes even walking through an empty area feel like something is going to happen. Whether this is noticed by the player or not, it's still working away in the background. Summer of 58 uses the same tricks continuously, and the problem with the repeated use of the same technique was that it came across as artificial, but still managed to make me jump long after I realized that it was a loop. Sometimes a sound you can't identify the location of can be terrifying. Amnesia Rebirth's fort area is filled with scripted events to make you feel like you're constantly being watched, but one of the more interesting ones uses the sound of feet that surrounds the player when the lights go out, making you feel like there's something in the dark with you, but you can't see it. I found this intolerable and had to escape the corridor every time it happened to me. Then there are things that are just nice to have. Directional audio can help with identifying the location of monsters. When you hear a roar with the headphones on, good directional audio can place it behind you to the left without you ever having to turn around and face it. Decent reverb can also make things both seem realistic spatially, with deep reverb in large rooms and stunted reverb in carpeted offices or something similar. It's yet another tool for placing you in the environment. The best games use all of these to their advantage. Good sound design enhances literally everything. Bad sound design can drag a player right out of the moment. Like in Emily Wants to Play, the lamp in the middle of the garage is unnaturally loud and doesn't make sense the kind of noises it produces either. It's not a speaker, it's a lamp. The same goes for the music that just doesn't fit in or sounds bad. If you've never heard it, here's the basement music from the DualShock version of Resident Evil 1. It's hard to believe they thought this was a good idea. When sound design is bad, the atmosphere suffers. It reminds you that you're playing a game, and one that's not as well designed as you'd expect.
I needed to remove the flesh from the bone. At first, I was lost as to how, but then I sawed it off with a handsaw, boiled it, then put the bone in a mortar. I had to get one, obviously. This was not something I'd done before. Finally, I mixed the dust with some white paint. It made for a lovely undercoat.
Voice acting has a range of effects on people, from something so realistic that it's harrowing, saddening, or heartfelt, to something so bad that it's almost comedic. I think a lot of people will agree that the voice acting in the original Resident Evil leaves a lot to be desired, but there is something to be said about cheesy B-movie voice acting that only enhances that specific vibe. At the end of the day, it's down to appropriation. Does bad voice acting suit the experience?
September 9th, 5:40 p.m. The mansion was nowhere to be seen on the map, so we finally had to ask the locals how to find it. They told us that Himuro Mansion had been empty for several decades now. The same ones who told us where it was also warned us not to come here, which was quite disconcerting.
In Fatal Frame, the voice acting is incredibly wooden. It's never bothered me a great deal, but there's no denying that it hurts some of the more frightening moments and makes a lot of characters more robotic and the player unsympathetic towards them.
Congratulations! Honestly, I mean it. Well done. I was only joking about the come get 'em thing. What say we celebrate with some nice, relaxing cyanide, huh? I'm sure I saw some anthrax lying around as well.
Penumbra Black Plague's voice acting isn't bad, but the tone the characters use take me out of the moment time and time again. For the voice of a hive mind infection, Clarence sounds like he should be doing stand-up comedy, and Amabel, the last survivor of a doomed research center, just sounds abnormally chipper and makes jokes too. It's hard to get past things like this, as they feel like they don't belong in the situations they're in, and it seriously detracts from the grim and desperate situation the game is centered around. Voice acting needs to fit in with what's going on, because that's what it boils down to, immersion and conveying the events in the story accordingly. The more voice acting fits into a scenario, the less the player is going to notice or take them out of the moment. The original Resident Evil 2's cheesy voice acting fits in with the dramatic story of the original game, along with its 90s soundtrack, and that's fine. The remake tells the same story, but the voice acting is more serious and reserved, and that fits with the game just fine. But if you used one set for the other, it would come across as jarring, and not just for the change in audio quality. Sound design is the glue that holds the atmosphere together. It contributes to the scares, it can help enhance the gore, it can bring a story to life. Sound design is important, it's essential, and the more time put into it, the better.
You must understand, Cash. I could never let them go. Where were your family when you were facing your final moments in the chamber anyway? You've left your old life, your old self behind. I'm all the family you need now.
Thank you for watching today's video. Next time I'll have a remake of Resident Evil 7 review for you. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to support the channel on Patreon and get access to some sporadically released reviews, including Sweet 776, a video explaining how my horror reviews are made, and the upcoming reviews are of Until Dawn and Rule of Rose for Patreon supporters too, as a thank you. Again, I'd like to remind you this whole thing is down to my opinion on horror games, and if you don't share this opinion, then that's cool, I get it. I'd like to point out that whilst I think sound design is incredibly important, I did not scream like a banshee or run away from the computer, and I advise you don't either. There'll be more horror reviews in the pipeline, and thanks for watching. And always go check out Bumps in the middle of the night. Peace.